Johnson & Johnson. Shares held, 327,100. Holding value, $48,699,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.02%. While Warren Buffett smiled upon healthcare stocks in Q3, his tiny Johnson & Johnson, at $150.85, position didn't budge. Like fellow defensive stock P&G, J&J has fallen out of favor with Buffett and represents nothing more than a token holding. Blame the diversified healthcare giant's history of headline-grabbing faceplants. The healthcare stock struggled with manufacturing problems and allegations of illegal marketing practices in 2010 and 2011. Buffett was critical of the company for those gaffes, as well as for using too much of its own stock in its 2011 acquisition of device maker Synthes. Disenchanted with Johnson & Johnson, Berkshire dumped most of its stake in 2012. Berkshire's position in J&J topped out at 64.3 million shares in 2007. Today, the holding company's equity stake comes to just 327,100 shares, about $49 million, which represents roughly 1/100th of shares outstanding. This holding could disappear at any time. If it does, chances are most people won't even notice. JP Morgan Chase. Shares held, 967,267. Holding value, $93,119,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.04%. Whatever affinity Warren Buffett had for JP Morgan Chase, at $117.30, is clearly gone. Berkshire Hathaway established its position during the third quarter of 2018 and upped it several times after that. But here's what he has done over the past 3 quarters. Q1 2020, cut 1.8 million shares, 3%. Q2 2020, cut 35.5 million shares, 61%. Q3 2020, cut 21.2 million shares, 95%. Berkshire still was the 6th largest shareholder in JPM as of the first quarter's end, but it's not even in the top 100 anymore. Part of the original attraction for JP Morgan is because of Warren Buffett's professed admiration for CEO Jamie Dimon. The two have partnered with Jeff Bezos, chairman and CEO of Amazon.com, to form a healthcare initiative intended to improve coverage and lower costs. Dimon and Buffett also have teamed up to decry the practice of giving quarterly profit forecasts, saying short-termism is hurting the economy. But banks have fallen out of the oracle's favor, and thus the JPM stake has been cut down to a minimal holding. Pfizer, new position. Shares held, 3,711,780. Holding value, $136,222,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.06%. As you'll see throughout this list, Warren Buffett went gaga over blue-chip pharma stocks during the third quarter. That includes a small position in big pharma name Pfizer, at $37.33. Pfizer is best known for blockbuster drugs such as Lipitor, for cholesterol, and Viagra, for erectile dysfunction, that long ago lost their patent protections, but it has a stocked pipeline. Investments in research and development, along with acquisitions, have resulted in several hit drugs on the market, including Ibrance, to treat breast cancer, blood thinner Eliquis, and Xeljanz, a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. Also, Pfizer, along with partner BioNTech, is among the frontrunners in the race to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. The pharmaceutical giant shines as a long-term holding, thanks in part to the healthy dividend stream. Pfizer has paid uninterrupted dividends since 1980 and hiked its payout every year since 2010. Still, Berkshire Hathaway only dipped a toe into this position. The holding company bought 3.7 million shares worth $136.2 million. That accounts for a minuscule 0.06% of the total portfolio value, making it one of the smallest position among the 50 Buffett stocks. Biogen. Shares held, 643,022. Holding value, $182,412,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.08%. Berkshire Hathaway already had a few healthcare holdings heading into the final quarter of 2019, and Buffett added to that number with his Q4 entry into biotechnology giant Biogen, at $250.96. The roughly 640,000 share stake is worth more than $180 million at present. That's hardly a huge stake, as far as Buffett stocks go. The holdings account for a little less than 0.1% of BRK.B's total equity portfolio. And Berkshire's not even one of Biogen's top 25 investors at just 0.4% of BIOB shares outstanding. While Buffett has a history of making bets on the healthcare sector, the small stake size signals this might be an idea from Lieutenants Ted Weschler or Todd Combs. Biogen's fates are most heavily tied at the moment to its Alzheimer's treatment, and lately, those fates haven't looked so good. Recently, an FDA advisory committee voted resoundingly against supporting Biogen's aducanumab for approval. Approving aducanumab, in the face of such an overwhelmingly negative vote and commentary, is virtually impossible, writes Baird's Brian Scorney, and would destroy the agency's reputation at a very tenuous time for the regulator, ahead of potential actions on COVID vaccines. One positive, however, Biogen still looks like a classic value play. Shares trade at just 9 times analysts' expectations for next year's earnings. Better still, Biogen also reliably generates several $billion each year in free cash flow. PNC Financial Services. Shares held, 1,919,827. Holding value, $211,008,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.09%. Buffett had long been comfortable with investing in the banking business. At the 1995 Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, he said the industry falls within our circle of competence to evaluate. But 2020's pain in the financial sector has forced the oracle's hand, and it's fair to say that Buffett has been on a full-blown bank purge in 2020. That included the continued shearing of his position in PNC Financial Services, currently at $126.29, which fell by another 3,430,759 shares, or 64%, in Q3. It's quite the reversal of fortune for PNC, which looked like it was gaining favor in the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. Warren Buffett began investing in PNC, the nation's 6th largest bank by assets and 2nd largest regional lender, during the third quarter of 2018. Buffett upped Berkshire Hathaway's stake by another 4% in Q1 2019. And he added another 6%, or 526,930 shares, to start this year. My, how times change. Buffett lopped off 3.9 million shares, or about 41%, from his PNC position in Q2, then further reduced it by almost 2/3 in Q3. Suncor Energy. Shares held, 19,201,525. Holding value, $234,834,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.10%. Suncor Energy, currently at $14.98, remains the lone energy position in the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. Fortunately, after trimming his position a little in Q1, the holding company added to it in a big way during Q2. Buffett bought 4.25 million shares during the second quarter to bring his stake to 19.2 million, or about $324 million. He stayed pat in Q3. It's still a small holding, representing about 0.10% of the Berkshire equity portfolio's worth, according to data from S&P Global Market Intelligence. But the stake is meaningful to Suncor, as it represents 1.3% of its shares outstanding, making Buffett the 12th largest owner of SU shares. If this bet on Suncor sounds familiar, it should. When Buffett entered SU during the fourth quarter of 2018, that marked the second time Berkshire Hathaway has taken a stab at Suncor. The company originally invested in the energy giant in 2013, then sold the entirety of the position 3 years later. Suncor, an integrated energy giant whose operations span oil sands developments, offshore oil production, biofuels and even wind energy, also sells its refined fuel via a network of more than 1,500 Petro-Canada stations. SiriusXM. Shares held, 50 million. Holding value, $268 million. Percent of portfolio, 0.12%. SiriusXM, Siri, $6.37, a company that reaches roughly 100 million listeners via its core satellite radio business and Pandora, which it acquired in 2018, is another stock pick related to John Malone. Malone is chairman of Liberty Media, which owns a massive stake in SiriusXM. As Kiplinger has noted, it's possible that all of Berkshire's investments in companies that are somehow tied to Malone's truly Byzantine corporate structure could very well be the responsibility of one of Buffett's portfolio managers. Liberty Media was a large position held by Ted Weschler's Peninsula Capital in his pre-Berkshire days. However, Berkshire's affinity for this position has been waning of late. Buffett first bought shares in Siri during the final quarter of 2016. Berkshire unloaded a small portion, 1%, of its SiriusXM position during the third quarter. The Oracle of Omaha then trimmed his position by another 3.9 million shares, or about 2% of Berkshire's stake, in Q1 2020. Berkshire Hathaway really took out the hatchet during this year's second quarter, however, unloading more than 82 million shares, or 62% of the remaining stake. That brings its ownership down from 3% to a little more than 1%. Nonetheless, Buffett, who left the holding alone in Q3, is the fourth largest owner of Series stock, well behind Liberty Global's 73% stake. M&T Bank. Shares held, 2,919,613. Holding value, $268,867,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.12%. M&T Bank, currently at $126.92, is a regional bank that operates more than 700 branches in 8 states, including New York, Maryland, and New Jersey, as well as Washington, D.C. It has been profitable year after year for decades, and it also has been a reliable dividend payer. These qualities have endeared Warren Buffett to the bank for a very long time. After all, Buffett has a soft spot for well-run, unassuming businesses, and he frequently cites the importance of management talent when it comes to deciding where to invest. He certainly was a fan of Bank's late CEO. In 2011, Buffett recommended that Berkshire Hathaway shareholders read M&T's annual reports, which were written by Robert Wilmers, chairman and CEO from 1983 until his death in 2017. Bob is a very smart guy and he has a lot of good observations, Buffett said. No wonder then, that MTB had been a member in good standing of Berkshire Hathaway's equity portfolio since 2001. His affection for MTB, like other bank stocks, has waned greatly in 2020, however. Buffett cut his position by 15% during the second quarter, and he hacked away another 35% during Q3. That's nearly 2.5 million shares in 2 quarters. But Berkshire still holds 2.3% of remaining shares, good enough to make it a top 10 investor. 15 mighty mid-cap stocks to buy for 2021. T-Mobile, new position. Shares held, 2,413,156. Holding value, $275,968,000. Percent of portfolio, 0.12%. Berkshire Hathaway bulked up its exposure to the telecommunications sector during the third quarter by acquiring a small stake in wireless communications company T-Mobile US, currently at $128.65. T-Mobile is certainly a much more attractive investment since it closed its $26 billion merger with Sprint in April. The deal created a real number 3 wireless company whose total subscribers are at least within the same ballpark as Verizon and AT&T. And in a way, it pairs nicely with Apple, which is the holding company's biggest stake. But Buffett hardly bought with both fists. The 2.4 million share, $276 million stake equates to just 0.12% of Berkshire Hathaway's total portfolio value.